What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today I want to very quickly talk to you guys about the importance of creating the path of least resistance. Now, this topic got sparked by a conversation that I was having with my client Lucky, and I often like to use Lucky as an example in my videos for the mere fact that in so many ways this dude really does embody like the craft methods. I can truthfully say in some ways, even more than clients who've been with me for years longer, he really takes the things that I say and the things that I try to teach and really incorporates them appropriately, whether we're talking about like, hey, the importance of pushing your accessories appropriately and actually like gauging your progress over time, whether we're talking about things like, hey, the sub-max approach and being comfortable with, letting the back down volume not be too aggressive and letting the top sets be where we get that intensity, being comfortable with those bigger jumps week to week to ramp up to a bigger end of the block finish. And then even little things like taking those for sure wins, like instead of going for like the 5 or 7.5 kg PR, taking the for sure PR by 2.5 and just stacking those blocks back to back to back. I could go on and on, but a lot of things that I talk about on this channel, I'm Powerlifting Now, Lucky does a really good job of, emphasizing. And one thing that we were talking about earlier today was that he simply noticed that, there was a time where I was doing like more weight on my secondary squat day, my 4x7, than what I'm doing now. But at this point, even though I'm doing less weight on that 4x7, even at the very end of the block of my week 4, when fitness is a little bit higher, I'm not doing as much as what I used to, but my primary days are still trending up and trending well. And that has been very, very intentional because there was a point in time, some months back where Lucky would maybe on his 4x7 on week 1, he might start off with something like 452 pounds. It might be like 440 to 452. Week 2 might be like 463 to 474. Week 3 might be like 480 to 490. And then his week 4 would be like an RPE based set where he can just push it based upon how good he's feeling. Whereas now it's something where like, okay, his week 1 might be something like, okay, 419 to 429. Week 2 might be 429 to 440. Week 3 might be 440 to 451. And then his week 4, for this block specifically, was just 463. He was feeling pretty good fitness-wise, but once he got to 4 reds, he realized, nope, it's not there today, and just took a little bit over what he did the previous week with 463. But that makes sense because we just came off the greatest training weekend that Lucky's ever had. He literally just doubled his total from this past nationals in training. So he hit his best total on the platform from September for doubles. And that's, that's on top of hitting that along with a 190 kg bench press with commands, clean as we've ever done, right? So PR double on the squat, PR double on the bench, PR double on the deadlifts. And that's, the PR double on the bench was after already hitting a smooth 1 rep max single. So it's this thing where we clearly see he's getting stronger. So we're not worried about the fact that he's not doing as much on the secondary days. He simply noticed that he's not. And that led to the conversation that I kind of want to, expand upon here in this video, that as coaches, right, or even if you're self-coaching, your job really should be, when it comes to your training and it comes to the adjustments and the things you're doing programming-wise, to create the path of least resistance. Listen, getting stronger and building muscle over time is already going to be a lot of work. It's already going to be a lot of effort. You're going to be on top of a lot of things like your variables, your eating, your sleeping, your stress management, figuring out what works for you, what you respond well to from a volume perspective, intensity perspective. There's a lot of things that you have to put together to kind of find that ideal programming for yourself. And even when you find that structure, you're probably gonna have to adjust a little bit over time, depending on how strong you get or depending on what life circumstances come up. So the goal should be to create the path of least resistance, so that way you're not making things harder than what they need to be, and then putting 100% of your effort into that path. Because oftentimes what we'll see is we'll see somebody that's putting in 100% effort, but maybe their programming just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you're putting all this time and effort to not even get the results you want. And then there might be other times where, okay, the programming is sound, you have created the path of least resistance, but you're not putting a whole lot of effort into it, so you're still not getting everything you could be out of it. It's a combination of both of those things, right? It's a combination of, okay, create the path of least resistance, then give 100% effort while walking down that path, and that's what's gonna get you good results, right? And understanding that what that looks like can change over time. The fact of the matter is there was a time where, just due to where Lucky's strength was on his primary days and the fact that he wasn't hitting as much objective load as what he is now, we had a little bit of room left in the tank to push the secondary days a little bit more. And the reason we were doing that is to help drive adaptations into the primary days. So like I said, before where it's something where it's like, okay, we're hitting, 440 to 452 week 1, and then like 452 to 463 week 2, and then like, okay, 463 to 474 week 3, and then just hitting like, a 500 pound plus, like 551 for like a 4x7, right? We were able to do that because we had enough gas in the tank after hitting our old primary day PRs to where we could do that, right? And I'm still big on that, right? The reason why I have a lot of my clients programming set up to where their week 4 secondaries come after the week 4 primaries is one, so that they don't push their secondaries too hard too early, but that if they hit a big week 4 primary and there's enough, gas in the tank to ride that fitness, they can get some of those additional PRs, right? And help themselves, even though they feel pretty fatigued on the week 1, they probably won't detrain quite as hard because the fitness elevation was so high, right? But what I have found is that over time, as a lot of my lifters get stronger, or maybe their life circumstances kind of change as they're getting stronger, they come in and they hit those big primary days, right? But then after doing so, there's not a whole lot left on the week 4 secondary. So they kind of have to just take it easy. They kind of have to take a little bit over the week 3, or they might even scale back. For some of my clients, I actually have their week 4 secondaries as the lowest exertion, right? And then for some of my clients, their week 4 primaries actually come at the very end, just because we already know that when they hit those big primaries, there's no point in pushing anymore. So we just scale right into the new block after that. And this is something that Steve Denovius talked about on Powerlifting Now. We all talked about it as far as on the Roundtable podcast, but he's had specific videos kind of going over this as far as back end deloading and kind of starting to deload early, like on the last week of the block, so that you feel a bit better on the first week of the block going into it. But the point that I'm kind of wanting to get at is simply this. The reason why this has happened and why Lucky is now touching lower on that secondary day on that 4x7 is because, one, there's simply not a need to push as hard. The fact of the matter is one, there's not enough, there's not enough recovery throughout the week for him to hit these now huge PR totals on the primary and then still come in and push his week 4 secondaries. Even on the days where maybe he could, it's like, is it worth it? Since we've already gone through the main work, which is the goal, is it worth just having ourselves feel more beat up going to the week 1? Oftentimes it's not. But beyond that, it's the fact that we understand that, okay, you know what? We were doing this before because we could do it to get those adaptations that we need. But now that we're doing even more work on the primary days, it's at a point where now it's like, we don't have to do as much on the secondaries in order to kind of bridge the gap. And as you get stronger, you guys are going to find that less is often more. And I've talked about this time and time again, right? It's kind of like we go through these phases. When you're a new lifter, it's kind of like you want to work hard, you can push hard, you can, so long as you're not going too crazy, you can probably recover from varying degrees of volume. You can probably push intensity more frequently because you're so new to the stimulus, and the stimulus itself isn't anything crazy because it's usually lighter weight because you're a newer lifter, right? So you're able to do it, recover, make those adaptations, and come push harder. But then you kind of get into that intermediate phase where you're kind of finding, okay, I got to find kind of like what works for me volume and intensity wise and kind of build off of that. And even once you find that structure, it probably will allow you to push a little bit harder, at the end of your blocks. If you can't push hard every week, at the end of your blocks, you can push a little bit harder because you found that structure. But then you get into these more advanced level territories where you're finding, man, I have to be very specific with just when I push in general. It might not be at the end of every block. It might be every couple of blocks, or it might be, hey, I push those week 4 primaries and then I chill out from there. And it makes sense, right? Because you're getting stronger. So the way that workload is going to look is going to be different. It might be a matter where, hey, you know what? A lot of my work now is more sub-max. Before I could work between like the 70 to 80% range, but as my warm-up max has gotten higher and those objective loads have gotten, higher along with it, now I'm working between like the 60 to 70% range or the mid 60 to mid 70% range because those objective loads are still increasing. And when we restart each training cycles, my warm-up max is going up, right? So now it's trying to stay between 70 to 8% more often than not beats me up very quickly. That's okay. That's normal. It might be something where you notice that, hey, before, there's a period of time on my secondary days where, okay, I was kind of like chilling under the RP cap, right? And that was going really, really well. But then it got to a point where, I need to push the RP a little bit closer to true to kind of bridge the gap as far as the intensity, which is going to be true for everybody anyway. At the end of the day, whether you're trying to be under a certain RP cap or right at the RP cap, everybody needs a certain threshold of workload done on the secondary day in terms of intensity and volume to feel good going to their primary day. That's true for everybody. But what that looks like might change. There might be a point where you're chilling under the cap and then you realize, I actually got to push a little bit harder to be where I need to be. And then you get to a point where it's like, I actually need to kind of scale back a little bit now because it's too much throughout the week. And there's going to be shifts and trends with it. But this is the main thing. When you get to that point, right, where it's like, hey, you know what, a lot of my back downs are going to be more sub-max. Or, hey, you know what, I can't push the secondary days quite as hard. Or, hey, I have to get a lot more of my volume through the accessories now. That's okay. A lot of people get caught up in trying to find ways to make what they were used to do working, where they can still stick with the old percentages or still push the secondary days on their final week of the block really, really hard, when there may not be a need to do that. Are you getting the main benefits you're looking for? Is that primary day trending up, whether it's an SBD day on Saturday or your primary squats on Monday, your primary days on Tuesday, whatever it may be? Is the big 3 on the primary days trending up? If it is, that's a win. And if you're finding that, hey, I actually am getting away with doing less, like, hey, I'm doing less on these days now, but this day is still trending up because of the cumulative workload throughout the week, that's a win. Find the path of least resistance. Don't get caught up in trying to feel like, okay, I found this structure, right? It works. and doing it in this exact way has always worked, so it always has to be this way. It's okay to accept the fact that within that structure, things may change. Now, mind you, it shouldn't change drastically. Once you kind of find a system that works for somebody, you should be able to kind of rinse and repeat and just adjust as needed. But understand that those adjustments may happen, and it may come in the form of less intensity on some days, more intensity on other days, maybe slight adjustments in volumes, maybe pulling a little bit back on content-specific volume and pushing accessories more. Maybe you pull back on some of your accessory work a little bit. It's okay with those adjustments, and part of being a coach is kind of seeing things before it happens. The reason why I already scaled Lucky's assigned loads on the secondary day back is because I was seeing how much progress we were making on the primary days, and I was seeing where we were kind of ending on the secondary days. And as I look at this, it's like, okay, over the next 3 months, if we keep progressing at the same rate, something's going to give. It's going to either get to a point where this is leaking too much into his primary days, or he might just flat out get hurt because we're pushing too hard too often. And rather than like, oh, well, let's just keep pushing and see what happens, I want to be ahead of that. So that's why I already started scaling his secondary days back already, still making sure that it's enough intensity to satisfy what we need on that 4x7 to drive adaptation into the primary day, but not so much where I then have to worry about, okay, is he gonna get too beat up too early? And that's why he has assigned loads on weeks 1, 2, and 3. And his week 4, I still give an RP base. He still has like an 8 or 9 on the week 4 for the 4x7. So that way on the days where he does still have me feeling good, he can still push things appropriately if he wants to. But if he knows that, hey, I'm pretty smoked from the primary day, he can just pull back and take what's comfortable for that day, which in this case ended up being the 463, which is well under the best he's done for a 4x7. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we don't really care what we can do for a 4x7. We care about, is that when our max going up, which it clearly is. So yeah, just wanted to take the time to kind of address this very quickly. As you guys already know, a lot of my longer format content is now on Powerlifting Now, but I want to take time to address this just to help you all remember to kind of think about these things. Like, hey, don't get so freaked out on if I'm seeing things change on this day, or if I'm seeing like, you know, the usual trend on this day change, so long as you can look at things collectively and see that I'm still getting the result that I want on the day that matters most. But yeah, that's it, guys. Just wanted to talk about that very quickly. Hopefully this was beneficial for you all. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below. Let me know why can we get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch you guys later.